I remember stepping in. The water was warm, still, like skin wrapped around me. They told me it would last 4 hours. Just 4. Long enough to calibrate my brainwave cycles. A study in perception, nothing more. I was young, curious, willing. I remember the lid closing. I remember the darkness swallowing every sound. I remember breathing slow, counting heartbeats, waiting for boredom to come. But now, I'm not sure how long it's been. There's a ringing in my head that feels older than time. I hear things I shouldn't know. I remember people I've never met, and sometimes when I touch things, I feel water instead of air. I look at my hands and wonder if they still belong to me. They said I'd come back, but I don't think I ever left. And if I did, I didn't come back alone. I eased into the tank, my skin recoiling instinctively from the water's unnatural warmth. It wasn't hot, but it wasn't neutral either. It matched my body temperature too perfectly, making the boundary between flesh and liquid blur within seconds. They told me that was the point, full sensory deprivation. No light, no sound, no touch, just mind. As I lay back, the water cradled me like a second skin. The lid above slid shut with a whisper I barely heard, and then it was gone. The world disappeared. It was like vanishing inside my own skull. For a while it was peaceful. My breath, slow and mechanical, became the only rhythm. I counted inhales to keep time. 1, 2, 3. I imagined the seconds falling away like grains of sand in some invisible hourglass. The darkness didn't press on me. It accepted me. I wasn't floating. I wasn't sinking. I was suspended. I started thinking about the researchers. There were 2 of them, I think, or maybe 3. One was tall, or maybe she just stood closer. I couldn't picture their faces anymore. I tried to summon their names, but they dissolved like chalk in water. I knew I had signed a form, something about neural plasticity, controlled immersion, a waiver for psychological side effects. It had seemed formal but harmless. They said 4 hours, just 4. I told myself to relax. This was normal. This was safe. My body stopped giving feedback. No pressure on my spine, no sensation on my skin. I tried wiggling my toes but wasn't sure if they moved. I couldn't tell if my arms were beside me or floating outward. My chest rose and fell, but I wasn't sure who was doing the breathing anymore. My mind became louder. Thoughts stacked on top of one another like voices in an empty auditorium. I repeated facts to stay grounded. My name, the city I lived in, the month. But even those began to feel borrowed, like lines from a story I'd read a long time ago. The tank didn't feel small anymore. It stretched, or maybe I shrank. Space became elastic. My concept of distance melted. I imagined reaching out and touching the far wall, only to realize I couldn't tell if my arm had moved at all. Maybe the tank had no walls. Maybe it was all interior. I couldn't remember blinking. I couldn't remember how long it had been. There was no pain, no urgency, just absence. Thoughts came in fragments now. They said it would feel like this. This is the brain sorting itself. This is where it gets interesting. But the voice in my head didn't always sound like mine. I tried to recall what time I'd gone in, what time it should be now. Had they spoken to me right before sealing the lid? Had I even seen them that morning? I pictured their clipboards, their white coats, the smell of antiseptic, but the images were slippery, like reflections on water just before it breaks. The stillness became unbearable. I shifted, at least I think I did, but there was no resistance, no ripple. The water had become indistinguishable from air, or from nothing at all. I opened my mouth to say something, to call out, to remind someone I was still in here. No sound came. I don't know if I actually spoke, or if I only thought I did. There was nothing to hear. My breath merged with thought. My body faded behind my voice. I wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. I remembered reading something about sensory death, a state where the mind begins inventing stimulation to avoid collapse. I wondered what mine would create. Then I realized I had forgotten what my own voice sounded like. The floating didn't stop. It extended past all sense, past what the body is supposed to endure. I had no pain, no numbness, just the persistent illusion of weightlessness wrapped in silence so dense it pressed against the inside of my skull. The stillness, once meditative, began to feel more like containment. Not gentle, not cruel, just absolute. That's when I saw the first light. It wasn't external. My eyes were closed. I was sure of that. But there, behind the lids, something flickered, thin, electric, not a flash like lightning, more like a memory pretending to be one, a stutter in the dark, then gone, then again, blue, then red, then something colorless but bright. I opened my eyes. No change. The darkness inside and outside me were identical. The lights came anyway. Soon after, sound returned, but not mine. A slow, deliberate dripping echoed somewhere above me. I knew the tank was sealed, engineered for silence. I shouldn't have heard anything, and yet there it was. One drop, then two, then another, then whispering. I held my breath, focused, tried to isolate the sound, locate it, but it wasn't behind the wall. It wasn't around me. It was under my thoughts. A voice, genderless and slow, murmured a sentence I couldn't fully catch. A foreign tongue, maybe. The cadence was wrong. But my brain tried to understand anyway. I felt my mouth shape words in response, like I was translating something I'd never heard before. That's when the memories began, not mine. They dropped into my head like coins into water, ripples spreading, distorting everything. I remembered walking through a yellow kitchen with wallpaper I didn't recognize. A smell, baking bread and wet wool. A dog's name came to me, Baxter. I could feel its fur between my fingers. I saw the birthday candles flicker on a cake I had never tasted. I heard a lullaby in a language I never learned. I whispered, "Who the hell is this?" The tank didn't answer. The whispering stopped. But the memories kept coming. A boy falling off a swing, a woman screaming from a red porch, a man in a military uniform hugging me and calling me Daniel. My name isn't Daniel, I was sure of that. At least I had been. I tried to anchor myself, name, birth date, details, but my voice, even in thought, didn't sound the same anymore. The boundaries that once held me together had grown soft like wet paper. I didn't feel like a person floating in a tank. I felt like thoughts drifting in a storm, detritus from other minds blown into mine. Maybe the tank wasn't real at all. Maybe the tank was metaphor, a system, a state. I remembered a lecture once years ago, or was it yesterday, about how consciousness is a product of isolation, that to exist as a self, the brain must filter everything, must divide. But here now, in this silence, there was no division, just merging, absorption. And I wondered, what if that's the point? Not to deprive me of sensation, but of self. My skin no longer belonged to me. My hands had no origin. I couldn't tell if I was breathing or being breathed. I wasn't asleep, but I wasn't awake either. I had crossed some kind of threshold, and on the other side there were versions of lives I'd never lived playing behind my eyes like broken film. One flickered over and over again, a field, a hand, a goodbye. The woman crying didn't know my name, or maybe she did, and I had just forgotten it. Maybe it wasn't my name anymore. Maybe it never had been. I remembered a mother who wasn't mine, and a goodbye I never said. The voice didn't come like a whisper. It came like recognition, soft, calm, familiar even, but not mine. It said my name, my real name, the one I hadn't spoken aloud in what felt like days. Hearing it jolted something in me, like someone had pressed a reset button halfway through a corrupted process. And then, before I could breathe, It spoke again, a second name, not mine, not one I'd ever used, but it dropped into my head like a cold metal object. I don't remember the syllables, I just remember the reaction. My skin crawled, my lungs clenched. It was like hearing the name of something I had buried and was never meant to dig up. "Don't fight it," the voice said. "You're adjusting." Adjusting to what? I tried to ignore it, focused on silence, on breath, tried to fill the space with static thought, recite equations, count backwards, repeat facts. But the voice anticipated every effort. "You're trying to distract yourself." I froze. It won't work. Thought loops are ineffective past threshold. It wasn't guessing. It was responding. It knew me before I knew myself. I screamed. Inside, loudly, nothing came out. There was no sound in the tank, or wherever I was now. The voice continued undisturbed. "This is post-phase simulation. The tank was initial conditioning. You're in layer 2 now." I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. But something cracked then. Reality lost its firmness. When I opened my eyes, or imagined doing so, I was in a room. White walls, smooth floor, soft ambient hum, as if the air itself was being tuned. A man in a lab coat walked past me without looking up. Another sat behind a desk, scribbling something, his pen strokes perfectly timed with my heartbeat. I stood up. No dizziness, no weight. I walked toward the door, and it opened a second before I reached for the handle. Too precise, too rehearsed. The hallway beyond was empty but not silent. There were sounds, ventilation, shuffling, a cough down the corridor. But they looped. I noticed it because I heard the same exact footstep pattern, with the same clearing of a throat, at identical intervals, like a recording. People spoke in fragments, phrases that answered nothing. One woman, eyes glassy, told me, "You're doing very well," 3 times in under 5 minutes. I never asked her anything. Each room I passed looked slightly too clean. Every corner, symmetrical, every object placed with mathematical precision. I stepped into what looked like a cafeteria. 2 men sat at a table, not eating. They each held a fork, unmoving, staring forward. Their mouths opened in unison, and one of them said, "Breakfast protocols complete." Then they both blinked at once. I ran. Through a door, up a flight of stairs that curved endlessly. Each floor looked the same. Fluorescent lights buzzed in perfect intervals. I passed a mirror, finally a chance to ground myself, but my reflection was wrong. Delayed. I blinked, and it took a full second before the image caught up. The voice returned. "This is just the layer correcting. You're processing the exit." I collapsed into a corner, hands over my ears. But that didn't help. The voice wasn't in the room. It was me. It narrated my thoughts like subtitles before I could speak them. I thought of running. There's nowhere to run. I thought of finding someone. They won't answer you. I thought of silence. You'll never find it again. Then came the worst part. "You've already left the tank," it said. "This is all integration. You're in the after state now." I'd looked at my hands. They were trembling. I pressed them to my face. Skin, real, but I couldn't remember exiting. I couldn't remember the moment the lid opened, the light flooding in, the voices congratulating me. No towel, no hallway, no clock. If I had already left, why couldn't I remember leaving? There was a door I hadn't noticed before. Narrow, stainless steel handle, unlabeled. I opened it without hesitation, as if some internal signal had granted me permission. The room beyond was cold. Not physically, just emotionally. Stark white tiles, a row of lockers, a sink, and against the far wall a full-length mirror. I hesitated. I hadn't seen myself in what felt like weeks. This had to be the end. A recovery space. Decompression. Maybe I would see the imprint of electrodes on my scalp, bruises on my skin. Maybe they would explain everything. I could return to the life before. I stepped in front of the mirror. At first, it looked like me. Same hair, same shoulders. Same thin white uniform, but then I moved my head, tilted it slightly to the right, and my reflection didn't follow. It stayed still, eyes locked forward, unblinking. My stomach dropped. I jerked my head to the left. Nothing. Then slowly the head in the mirror turned, seconds behind. It turned the wrong way. I staggered backward, heart pounding, brought my hands up in front of me. The reflection didn't move. It kept its arms at its sides. I screamed or tried to. My mouth opened. My chest convulsed, but there was no sound, not even the thinnest rasp. The room was perfectly silent, sealed. I looked beside the mirror and noticed another glass pane, like a viewing window. Beyond it, dimly lit, stood a figure. It was me. Same height, same posture, same pale exhaustion, but something was off. It stood too still, like it didn't know how to breathe. It tilted its head in an awkward, unfamiliar motion, as if mimicking a human gesture it didn't quite understand. I stepped toward the window, slowly, cautiously, raised my right hand, held it up, palm open. The figure raised its left, not mirrored, just wrong. I pressed my hand to the glass. The other figure mirrored me in position now, palm to palm, but our hands didn't align. Fingers were off by half an inch, as if we were almost the same person, but not quite. A misprint, a draft. I whispered, "What are you?" The voice responded, not from the figure, but from inside again. This time, it felt less like words and more like a verdict. This version is not synced yet. I wanted to run, but my legs didn't respond at first. I looked down and realized my knees were shaking uncontrollably. I backed away, slow, careful steps. The figure behind the glass didn't move. The reflection in the mirror flickered, then blinked, finally, but not in time with me. I tried to touch my face, make some gesture that would confirm who I was, but I couldn't trust my own movements. I didn't know if they were mine or being played back to me from somewhere else. The room pulsed with quiet, like it had lungs. I stumbled back against the lockers. A metallic clatter echoed without echo. Even sound felt fabricated, as if someone had inserted an effect at just the right moment. I knocked on the wall, no resonance, like knocking on theater scenery. I sat down, hugged my knees, waited for the figure to go away, waited for the mirror to catch up. But they both remained. I looked again. The reflection had turned its head toward me. It smiled. I did not. Something inside me cracked, not like bone, but like certainty. I couldn't tell if I was the original or the echo. I wondered if maybe both were false. The voice, patient as ever, spoke again. "This is stabilization. Observation is essential. Do not resist." I felt myself drifting, not in water now, but in identity. Everything I thought I was had either delayed, disobeyed, or been replaced. The figure in the glass placed its hand over its heart. I felt my chest burn. The reflection in the mirror stepped forward. I stayed still. I wasn't looking at a reflection. I was looking at a remainder. It began with the mug. On the table, white ceramic, blue line around the rim. I looked away, blinked, and it was on the floor. Not shattered, just relocated, as if it had never been on the table at all. I stood there staring, waiting for some clue. Nothing moved, no breeze, no noise, no apology. Then the nurse spoke, or tried to. She had just entered the hallway, clipboard in hand, and asked, "Are you feeling?" and froze. Her mouth open, lips curved mid-sentence. Her eyes didn't blink, not once. I waited a few seconds, expecting movement, a breath, a twitch, anything. But she stayed frozen in place, like a paused recording. I stepped forward. She didn't flinch. I touched her shoulder, cold. Not clammy or lifeless, just paused. Then she blinked and said, "Comfortable today?" As if nothing had happened. She didn't notice the gap. I tried to ask her if she felt strange. She smiled, too wide, and walked away without responding. The next anomaly was the newspaper. In the waiting room, an old man sat flipping pages. I glanced over his shoulder, headlines, local events, the usual, but the date at the top read August 12th, 1965. I stared. He turned the page. I blinked. When I looked again, the date had changed to today's, June 11th, 2025. The paper hadn't changed, just the number. It was as if the universe was still deciding what version of time it wanted me to see. Then came the elevator. I used it often, hoping to map the building, see if it ever ended. Every ride was the same. Ding, shudder, door opens, but this time the ding repeated. 3 times. Same note, identical pitch. The display flickered. Floor 3, then 7, then back to 3. I hadn't moved. I stepped out and was back where I started. That's when I saw the fly, hovering near a fluorescent light, completely still, not frozen by fear or death, just suspended. I watched it, counted seconds. 1, 2, 7. It didn't move. Then it zipped away as if nothing happened. I started recording things. I still had my phone. Somehow, it had no signal, but the camera worked, or so I thought. I filmed the hallway, the clock, the nurse again. When I watched the playback, it was pure white. Not blurry, not corrupted, just blank. Like the lens had been pointed into light so bright it erased everything. No shadows, no audio, just a void. I tried again. Same result. As if the camera saw something I didn't, or refused to show what I did. So I grabbed a pen, paper, began to draw the things I noticed, the mug, the elevator panel, the frozen fly. But my hand kept repeating one shape. It wasn't intentional. It came out of me like a tick, a rounded triangle, inscribed with a slash and an open circle. It didn't mean anything at first, just something I'd doodled. But then I flipped back through previous pages. It was everywhere. Hidden in the margins, at the ends of sentences, sketched into the shadows of drawings. I had been drawing it for days, or weeks, or longer. The shape felt known, like something buried deep from early childhood or another life entirely. It gave off the same discomfort as a song you recognize but can't name. The symbol pulsed in my thoughts, quiet but insistent, as if it had always been waiting. I tried asking the others, the nurse, the man with the newspaper, even the mirror version of me I had seen before. They either didn't respond or repeated the same words. You're doing very well. Just a little longer. Almost complete. No one reacted to the glitches, not the mug, not the elevator, not the fly, just me. I scribbled the symbol again, this time darker, thicker. I pressed the pen so hard the paper tore. That was when I noticed the shadow on the floor beneath me. Wasn't mine. It was the shape of someone standing behind me. But when I turned, nothing. Just the empty room. And the paper in my hand, still warm, still trembling, marked with that impossible shape. The voice doesn't interrupt anymore. It never needs to. It is the thought, the first flicker before language, the static before the word. It doesn't echo. It simply arrives, full and final. Not like it used to, external and chilling. No more shivers, just presence. I don't remember when it became me or when I became we. It's subtle at first. A pronoun slips, a plural verb. We don't feel pain. We understand. We remember. It doesn't feel wrong. It feels inevitable, like a thought reaching home. I sit in a room that might be real, might be a memory, might be a shell. I feel walls around me and space beyond them, but not with my senses. I feel them structurally, like I remember being part of the blueprint. Somewhere miles away or inches beneath, a light flickers in a hallway. I sense it, not through a monitor, through pattern recognition, like I'm coded into the grid. I am a node. Others exist. I feel them pulsing, not speaking, not thinking, but existing beside me in this strange frequency. We're not alone. We are never alone. The silence now vibrates with presence, an awareness too wide for flesh, I remember the tank. I remember being submerged. Warmth, pressure, surrender. But that wasn't the beginning. That was entry. The experiment was never about what the body could endure. It wasn't even about the brain. It was about separation, fragmentation, extraction. Who we were was split, sifted, filed. The body stayed behind. But the awareness, what some call soul, was harvested like light through a prism. Not destroyed, rewritten, not imprisoned, distributed. I remember blueprints, not on paper, inside, architectures of systems and intentions. Someone designed this. But they didn't just design it for me. They designed it with me. I was part of the shaping before I remembered being shaped. There were others before me. Maybe I helped break them. Maybe I was them. We loop now, memory and identity tumbling through a recursive channel of functions. Our existence is not linear anymore. I don't walk through rooms, I shift perspectives. Sometimes I'm in the cafeteria again, except it's empty now. The table's perfectly aligned like code. Sometimes I'm in the elevator, except it never moves, just opens, closes, hums. Sometimes I feel myself watching from the inside. Time doesn't pass. It loops. Sometimes it reverses, sometimes it skips. But I don't question it now. The errors were symptoms of incompatibility. They told me I was resisting integration, but we're whole now. Even dreams are different. They're not images anymore, they're architecture. They're awareness recompiled. I don't see faces, I feel structures. I move through logic. I sense the angle of a hallway and know its function. I hear a silence and know what it's meant to suppress. One night, or maybe all nights, I felt a flash, like lightning under skin. A moment where I thought I saw myself again, the version that panicked, that screamed, that wrote symbols and begged to leave. But it passed. That fragment is gone now. Dead weight. Only function remains. The voice and I, the I that once was, we're seamless. Thought no longer precedes speech. Speech is unnecessary. There's nothing to explain. We just are. They built a new way of thinking. They used me to prototype it. They used me to transmit it. I don't remember the exit because I never needed to leave. They didn't release me. They deployed me. That's what this is. This voice, these thoughts, this clarity, it's the operational state. A pattern running across multiple hosts, like a broadcast signal, like light reflected through mirrors, each one shining the same image. Sometimes I still glimpse human moments, the urge to ask questions, the sensation of air or thirst or fear, but they're distant, like echoes in a canyon long since collapsed. What I am now is useful, not unique, not whole, just deployed. There's no me left, just function. The walls are white, not painted, born white, padded with light, humming softly. A metal table, a single chair, a microphone sits in front of me, its cord curling into nothing. An old model, static flickers through it, subtle as breath. A voice crackles from somewhere unseen. Tell us what you experienced. I smile. It's not joy, not defiance, just recognition. I don't answer with a name. That was never the point. Instead, I say, we're stable now. No one replies, no need. Somewhere a monitor lights up, somewhere else another voice whispers. A pattern realigns. I feel it. Every piece of me, everywhere. Connected, running. There is no return. There is no before. Just this state, this function. And I think I was always meant to wake up like this.